Hi, I'm Jeff, one of the admins from Woodworking UK, and this is a video to help people decide if it's worth buying budget tools or if it's worth spending the extra on something better or something that's perceived to be better. This video will deal with table saws, tabletop saws, side saws, and in particular these two. This is the Lumberjack tool saw, which is a 10-inch saw, a full 10-inch saw, and this is for sale at around £220. This is a DeWalt saw, which is probably the best seller. This is the last model. They've updated it slightly since I bought this 3 years ago, but it is still very similar. And these retail at over £800, so 4 times the price of that. Now, for most people, £800 is a big investment on a tool, but if you use it for your bread and butter to pay the mortgage, then yeah, I can see why. If you're a hobbyist, a DIYer, you're just getting started, then would a £200 saw be as good, or do you, in the meantime, before you need something that will run forever or run for years without any problem? Or indeed, will the DeWalt run for years without any problem? I'm sure there are people who've had problems. So I'm going to run some. I'll probably edit this video and put some bits in either on the end of to what I've done with it, because I've had it a few weeks now and I've done a few projects with it. I've done a lot of cuts. The saw is provided with a 24 tooth. No, the saw is provided with a 48 tooth blade, which is a bit fine for ripping. So I bought a budget blade, a 24 tooth. Axminster don't go down to 24 tooth, but I ordered one, and again it was a budget blade because this is a budget test. I've already got a different Freud blade in the DeWalt, so hopefully in the videos that I can put on the end that show me doing some sawing, you'll see that it has no problem. But as I say, a 24 tooth rips a lot better than a 48 tooth, where it just makes the motor struggle and you get a bit of smoke and you can burn things. So I went for a coarser blade. So I'll run through some of the features that you get with the saw and then try and do a comparison with the DeWalt. Right, comes with a mitre gauge, so does the DeWalt. I lost the DeWalt one within a few days of buying it because it was rubbish and wandered about. The one that comes with the Lumberjack is a slightly better fit. There's still a tiny little bit of movement, maybe a 1/4 of a millimetre or something, which means that the cuts can be a tiny bit off. But like I say, it's not a cabinet maker's saw. Nothing is going to be absolutely perfect, and I wouldn't expect it to be for £200. So I'm just trying to manage expectations there. You can buy a mitre gauge, from China, and they fit perfectly and they can be adjusted and they are a lot better. And that was my upgrade for the DeWalt, or the DeWalt. That fits perfectly on the Lumberjack, so that's a worthy addition. That's about £55 or more, depending on where you buy it. And that's worth doing. So, guide. Crown guard on the top. On here, it's got a crown guard that can be adjusted, and it comes off so that you can do trenching cuts. Obviously, do so at your own risk, but you can. This comes off, like I said. The riving knife on this is adjustable. It drops down at the back, so you've still got a riving knife even with a trenching cut. The DeWalt doesn't do that. You need to buy yourself a new riving knife, or certainly that model. I'm not sure on the new model, but that one, you need to buy yourself a new riving knife and get the angle grinder out and cut it flush and remount it and put it back on. The riving knife on that is a fiddle to change. On here it's a couple of screws, a press, and it drops down, and the whole thing comes off. So that's a good feature. Also, the crown guard is split into 2 halves, so that if you do a close cut to the fence, that lifts up, but you're still protecting the blade on this side, so you're still protecting your fingers from the blade on this side. Also, the crown guard has a gap in it, so that you can see directly down onto the blade. So if you're measuring things, it makes it a lot easier to do that. The DeWalt guard isn't. It's solid. Fortunately, I mean, fair dues to DeWalt, that the whole assembly, that and the riving knife is around 20 quid delivered, so it's worth getting a spare anyway. Right, back to the Lumberjack. The insert plate sits nice and flat, and the most important thing, the fence. This is what everybody asks about, and it fixes it. It clamps down at the front, but there's a hook at the back. Some saws don't come with a full length fence, and there are reasons for that. It kind of, you know, it can help with kickback if you've got half size fence, but in that case the fence needs to be locked solid at the front. Right, so nice solid fence, doesn't bend on its own, clips on at the back, clips over at the back, and locks into place at the front. Because it does that, then there can be a slight, it won't be square with the blade unless you check it, because, you know, obviously that locks at the front, so you can still have a tiny little bit of movement in the fence before it actually locks tight. So it's worth checking that. Once it is locked tight, it's absolutely solid, and I haven't managed to move it. I'm sure some people will, but for what I do, it's been absolutely fine. The extending table, this might be interesting. Right, so you've got to loosen that, you pull the table out, and it extends to hold things. Now, one of the problems that I did find with this saw is, as you extend the table, because it's only held with a couple of screws at one end, it starts to sag. So at a full extent, it's probably 2 or 3 mil out, which means you get that. But if I was using it at home, I'd have a block that would block that up, so that wouldn't be that much of a problem. It's not great, obviously, but it's not a showstopper. The motor's powerful enough, it adjusts to 45 degrees, one direction that way. Let's have a think what else. Comes with a push stick, but make a longer one. The push stick is one of those that's quite brittle plastic. The DeWalt comes with a push stick, again, nice and short, make a longer one. The rubber stoppers that sit on the top of the bench are quite hard rubber, so that the saw doesn't really stick to the bench, so I clamp that down. The DeWalt one, the rubber stoppers are a little bit softer, a little bit grippier, so they do stick to the bench. It's more effort to move it, so when you're pushing something through the saw can move. But again, if you use it every day, if it's in your workshop, you'd know that, and you'd put a clamp on, or you'd screw it down. This isn't a review of the DeWalt, so I'm not really going to show you the DeWalt features, other than, you know, the biggest selling feature for the DeWalt is the rack and pinion fence, which is instantly adjustable. It's always going to be square because it's locked in, and it has a support for long pieces of timber or boards. So when you put a board out, when you wind that on, the extra bit flops down and will support a board at this end. That doesn't have that. So you've got to decide whether that's a feature that's worth paying the money for if you need it. But the rack and pinion fence on this is superb, and can't fault it. Right, plenty of power. The noise, the DeWalt is louder than this. This is quite significantly, it's like 10 or 12 dBs less than that, which is quite significant in a workshop. Something worth watching out for. They both have dual extracts on the back, so you need to get a splitter made up. Now Dan Peacock can do them, or if you fancy it, you can order them from various suppliers. DeWalt do one, but it's £75 for this saw, which is a disgrace for something that's pretty essential. It's basically a couple of tubes with a Y piece, so like I say, Dan can provide you with all the bits for that, and he did for this, for me. The power switches are quite awkward to get to on both saws. They do work fine, but you need to know where they are. Obviously it's essential you know where the power switches are. On the DeWalt, I had it pimped by Paul Taylor. He sent me a flappy paddle. and I'm sure either Paul makes them or you can have one. You can make one for yourself for this, and it just instantly, it gives you the instant thing with a. You can do it with your knee if you've cut your fingers off. So that pretty much covers everything. I think they're the same sort of weight. They've got steel cages around the, this is a steel bar around the outside, so it's quite protected from knocks and bangs. And I think that pretty much covers it. Hopefully, if I manage to put the video together, or the videos together of me doing some cuts, it might be interesting, it might be really boring, or you zip along to the end. But in the main, £800 saw, 800 plus, £200 saw, 220, something like that. You've got to decide whether you want to spend an extra £600 on a saw. That buys a lot of blades and a lot of timber, and me personally, for what I use a table saw for the prep, I'd be seriously considering looking the cheaper route. The DeWalt is lovely, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get one. But if it was my own money and I was going to a shop to buy one, I'd be seriously considering the cheaper saw. I know a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, I love my DeWalt and I love my expensive saws," but how many people actually use them a lot to justify the cost? And I would think there's quite a few people on here that don't. So to me, it's highly recommended. I'm hoping to pass this on to the local men's shed, and they will probably give it a hammering, and so we'll probably get a long-term view on that, which will be interesting. Other than that, I think that pretty much covers it. If you've got any questions, obviously stick them underneath. I'm sure the Lumberjack tool people will monitor the posts and see and take anything on board from that. I know they get some criticism, but fair dues to them. They're involved in the forum, and a lot of people won't. We've tried the big manufacturers and they just won't touch us, so because there's nothing in it for them. People buy the tools regardless. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the video and the clips make some sense. As I said, put some comments underneath. Thanks for watching. So this isn't something I'd normally do. I've taken the guard off. I've reduced the riving knife. It is adjustable inside, which the more expensive one isn't, which when I come to do the comparison I'll show you. So that drops down and is adjusted by a tightening lever, a pivot lever inside, so that locks that into place. So you can do cuts that are deeper than that. That's a 100mm beam, an old-fashioned one, proper 4-inch. The cut is about maybe 10-12mm shy of the top, so it's going to have to go through in 2 passes. Obviously it's not ideal, but it's what most people, certainly people on site, would do. It contravenes all sorts of health and safety because you've got no guard and your riving knife isn't the full height of the blade, but it's what some people do. So I'm going to sort of show this at the end as a, this is your own risk, because I know a lot of people do it and I know a lot of people want to do it, but I would normally cut this on a bandsaw, put it through the thicknesser to get it to the right size, but I'm going to show that this can do it, and obviously I'll take some flack for that, but it can do it, and it's designed to do it because this drops down and locks in place. So we'll give it a whirl. Right, so scary part of the day over. I've managed to cut a 10mm strip off a piece of 4x2 or 100mm by 50mm. 2 passes. Obviously, like I said, it's not something I'd recommend because you've got no guard. The riving knife isn't as high as the blade, but it did the job and it went through straight, no problem at all. That's a 24 tooth blade. That's a budget blade. Obviously a better blade, a more expensive blade would last a lot longer, but then that's a fair proportion of the price of the saw. Whether anyone would actually do that or not, I don't know. Certainly people on a budget wouldn't. I think £20 for a blade is probably as much as some people will pay. Me. And it did the job, no problem, no fuss. Unfortunately it's filled the garage with dust. I'm going to have to put the extractor on and I'll go make a cup of tea while it cleans the air, and then I can come in and put the knife back on and it's nice and safe again. So today I'm looking at extra features on the saw, and it's got a sliding table, a sliding extending table. What I have noticed is it's perfectly flat table, that's very acceptable. But when you put the rails right out, then there's a certain amount of play. Now that at the full extent, that's maybe 2 or 3 mil. As far as I can see, it can't be altered because this rail here is slightly bigger than this rail. So when it's at full extent, it wobbles about a bit. There's no adjustment for tightening it up. So I would say that if you were going to use it at its full extent, you would need to block that up so that it is perfectly level if you need this width.